Hello, and welcome to the first lesson of our new topic, which is all about the Planet Suite by Gustav Holst. But we're also going to be looking at some mythology, Roman mythology, certainly today. We're going to be looking at the science behind the planets themselves. So it's music, it's science, it's Roman mythology today, but different planets. We're going to be looking at different things. So it's a sort of a culmination of different topics all brought together in one under this mantle of music, the amazing, awesome music of Gustav Holst. Now, for those of you that have been to theatre of music lessons before, you are probably aware that I will say to you, bring with you a piece of paper, a pen or a pencil, or there are worksheets that are produced for each of these lessons with information and questions and things like that for you to have a go at. Part of it is things that we do during the lesson. Part of these things are activities that you can do after the lesson, but they're all on the worksheets and you can find those on the website, and they're always put up the day before. Or JPEGs, if you go onto Facebook, there's JPEGs of these versions as well, to try and make it as easy for people to access everything as possible. But if you haven't got any of that, it's fine. Piece of paper, pen, pencil, you're set up. It'll be absolutely fine. So let's get on. Let's start our trip through the planets and our little voyage through the planets. So we are looking at the Planet Suite by a composer called Gustav Holst. He was a British composer, and there are 7 movements, 7 separate pieces to this orchestral suite. And anybody who joined us for Peer Gynt will know that within the Peer Gynt suites we had 4 pieces. Here we have 7, and that ties in brilliantly because there are 7 lessons this half term. So we'll be having 1 lesson on each of the planets. Now, each movement is named after a planet in our solar system, but what's really important to know is that these are not in the order that they appear in our solar system from the sun. Holst has put them in the order that he wants to put them in. And actually, the very first of these pieces to be written was Mars. And so Mars is the very first piece as part of the suite. And actually, in many ways, is probably the most dramatic. And so it's a really good piece to start with. Holst described these planet suites as a series of mood pictures. So have that in the back of your mind when you're listening to it in a little while. It's sort of a mood picture, gives you a sense of this character, this astrological body, however you want to think of it. The premiere took place of these pieces in September 1918. They were written over quite a long period of time. He started writing in 1914, and some people say, well, maybe because Mars is the bringer of war, and that's the piece we're going to be listening to today, and it was the first one he wrote, maybe it was sort of like a sort of a precursor before the First World War. But Holst himself said that that was not the case. What else can I tell you? Mars was the first one to be written, I said that, but then it was followed by Venus and Jupiter. And it is written for an absolutely huge, I mean, we're talking massive orchestra. There are like, I don't know, 4 horns, group of trumpets, trombones, 2 sets of different types of trombones. You've got 2 harps. You've got piccolos, flutes, oboes, bass oboe, English horn, clarinets, bass clarinet. I mean, it's massive. It's a huge orchestra that he's writing for. Okay, so that gives you a bit of background to the planets, the suite as a whole. And you can see our little picture there of Gustav Holst in the corner, just in case you weren't sure who this picture was about. That's who he is. That's Gustav Holst. Okay, so Mars, the bringer of war. Let's just find out a little bit about Mars himself before we start sort of delving into the music side of things. He looks a bit, well, how would you say he looks? I think he looks a bit aggressive. He's very determined, strong, powerful. Well, that's quite appropriate. He's a Roman god. He's one of the most important of the Roman gods, and we'll find out in a little while why. And he's the Roman god of war. And he's often portrayed wearing armor and a helmet and carrying a spear because he's ready for battle. He's ready to get going. And soldiers would pray to Mars before battles, asking him for favors and protection so that they would be safe during the battle, the upcoming battle that they were going to take part in. He's the son of two other Roman gods, Jupiter and Juno. And he had very powerful parents because Jupiter was considered the sort of the king of the Roman gods, if you like. He was the most powerful. And because he'd got such powerful parents, that makes him sort of have more of a significant status amongst all of the other Roman gods. And the theme is there of sort of strength and leadership, because they were very strong characters. They were leading all the other Roman gods. And so he's got that strength and leadership in there as well. He's portrayed as a warrior and as a protector. And this sort of symbolizes valor and the protection of Rome and the empire. So he's all about, he fights if he needs to, but it's all about protecting Rome and protecting the empire. He's credited with being the father of Romulus and Remus. Romulus and Remus are very important within Roman sort of mythology, because Romulus and Remus were considered to be the founders of Rome. They created Rome. They were the sort of forefathers, if you like, of Rome. March, the month March, is named after Mars. And actually, there's several festivals that are held within March to honour Mars. And one of them is the Ides of March, which is held on the 15th of March. And temples were constructed in Mars's honour as well, to sort of to worship him. A lot of Roman poets, like people like Virgil, have depicted Mars as this heroic figure, really powerful, heroic figure with these virtues of strength and courage. So there's quite a lot there about Mars, the character, the Roman god. And let's see what you think. But when you listen to the music, see how you think those characteristics, those sort of feelings about who Mars is depicted in the music. As it goes, when it comes to Holst was actually very interested in astrology and the stars and the astrological, there we go, astrological characteristics. That's a really hard word to say. Of different characters and the different sort of characteristics of the planets themselves. And so this idea of Mars being the bringer of war, the characteristics that character, that planet would have. So we're going to have a listen, and then I don't have to say anything. We're going to have a listen to the opening of Mars, bringer of war. Now, as ever, and I say this every time we have a live lesson, this is not a real orchestra playing. This is created by me. It's using sounds from computers, and I've generated it, I've created it, I've inputted all the data to make this piece of music so that we're not infringing any copyright. I would always 100% encourage you to have a listen to a real orchestra play, because there are certain things I can't produce on a computer when I'm doing this. And so you need to listen to the orchestra playing it so that you can really get the full experience of what this piece of music truly sounds like. Now, we're only going to be listening to the very beginning. It's quite a big piece, as you can imagine. So we're only going to be listening to the very beginning. But what I want you to do is listen to this opening of the piece and describe what you can hear. Think about the instruments that are being used. Think about the dynamics. We've talked about dynamics before, the louds and the quiets. Think about the tempo. Tempo is how fast or slow the music is going. and think about how the music reflects the title, and see if you can use some key words. Now, over the past however many lessons, I've been introducing key words to you, and if you visited us before and joined us for a lesson before, you might have come across some of those keywords. If you don't know keywords, if you can't think of a word to describe a tempo, it doesn't matter. Just describe it in normal, is it fast, slow, very slow, however, whatever it might be. But if you can use these keywords, then obviously that's brilliant. That would be brilliant. Now, as usual, I always say it's a good idea for me to get out of the way while you're listening so that you can truly concentrate on what you're hearing. So we'll listen to it twice to give you an opportunity to get your ideas down. I always say, listen to it the first time, get some ideas in your head, and then as you listen to it the second time, that's when you do the writing. Here it is for the first time. Okay, so we're going to have another little listen so that you can get some of your ideas written down as you listen to it the second time. Here we go. Okay, so let's see what you've come up with for your answers as you are listening to it. So, first of all, let's think about the tempo. I think the tempo is a nice, easy one to start with. It's quite a fast tempo. It's sort of the speed that it's going at. And we would call that allegro. A fast tempo we call allegro. And if you think of the word allegro, it sounds fast. And you can see, because it's a keyword, I've underlined it so that you can see what that keyword is and obviously what it means. And that's hopefully, as we go through, you'll remember more and more of these words. The beginning of the piece opens really quite quietly. And then it builds and builds and builds. And we call it, when it's quiet, we write it down as P in the music. P means quiet, piano. F means forte, which is loud. And so the more Fs you add into the music, obviously, the louder it is. And it builds, the music actually builds up to F, 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 which you can imagine is very loud. We haven't even got to the loudest bit in the music yet. It gets even louder than that. Okay. I've put next clashing keys. Now, we've talked a little bit about scales and how scales are put together, and scales sound very pretty and very nice. But if you sort of combine notes that clash, you get this sort of clashy feel. It feels very uncomfortable. And so if I played a C next to a D, because they're right next door to each other, it would create this sort of clashy, uncomfortable feeling. And so what Holst's doing is he's using a lot of these sort of clashes to make it feel uncomfortable. You don't want war to be comfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable, unpleasant. So he's creating this clashing idea. You've got an ostinato, a repeated pattern that is going on throughout, which sort of gives it a military feel. You get this da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun 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 dun. That sort of rhythm underneath, that drum ostinato. And the timpanis, the kettle drums, however which one you want to sort of use terminology wise, the same instrument, they are playing that drum pattern. But then so are the strings. The strings are playing that pattern as well. And it's very important, sort of, we've moved on to this, and I wouldn't expect you to know this. Collegno. So I wasn't able to produce this on the recording that you've just been listening to, but if you listen to a real life orchestra playing this, what they're doing is, in violinists, violas, cellos, double basses, they play, it's actually that way around, they play with a bow. So the bow goes up and down across the strings, okay? And that's what produces the sound. And there's sort of hairs that make up a bow. So one side's wood, and one side of these hairs, and it's the hair side that they pull across the strings. But if you're playing collegno, you're turning your bow the other way up, and you're using the wooden side of the bow on the strings, and it's that wooden side playing the string pattern, da 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 dun 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 dun, which gives it its percussive feel. It sounds, you hear it. Listen to an original recording and you'll see exactly what I mean. It sounds very different to the recording sounds that I was able to produce, because I just haven't got that as an option on the computer. The last thing I've put on this on the slide for you here is a 5/4 time signature. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That gives it an uneasy feel as well. We like things that add up to 3 and 4 and 2, and they're very, straightforward. We're 1, 2, 1, 2. We like that. Or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But 5/4 gives this uneasy feel, and actually 5/4 is what we call an irregular time signature. And actually, if you think about it in this way, if you think about prime numbers, okay, bit of maths, prime numbers. So 5 is a prime number, isn't it? Because it's only divisible by itself and 1. 7, it's the same thing. It's only divisible by itself and 1. If you write a time signature that is using one of those numbers at the top, it gives this irregular feel, because you can't divide it up into sections. You can't divide it into 2 or divide it into 3. It's not divisible. And so because of that, it feels wrong. And so what you end up doing is you split it into 3 and 2, or 2 and 3. There's some very famous pieces of music that have used this 5/4 time signature to create the feeling of water lapping. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So like rowing effect, as you're moving the oars, works really well in 5/4 because it's that irregular feel. Underneath the time signature there, you can see that I have written out the rhythmic ostinato, and it's got something that maybe looks a little bit weird at the start. It's something called a triplet. Triplets are in groups of 3. You have 3 notes in the space of 2. So what we've got here are quavers, and you can see later on the bar you've got 2 quavers next to each other and their tails joined together, and that's how we would normally see quavers. That's how we're used to reading them. But at the beginning of the bar we've got 3 quavers that have joined together, and they've got a number 3 over the top, and that's telling us that where we would normally have 2 quavers, we've actually got 3. And you have to write it that way, because if we just put 3 quavers and then the 2 crotchets and 2 quavers and a crotchet, the bar wouldn't add up. It would add up to 5.5, and that you can't have a time signature of 5.5. So the triplet is telling us 3 in the space of 2. And when you listen to the rhythm, 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 3. You can sort of see you're sort of squeezing them in, because they're being played quicker to fit into that space. Now, it's an ostinato pattern. I think we could have a go at doing this ostinato pattern in time with the music. So just have a little listen again so that you get a feel for how this works, how the ostinato pattern comes together. So it's the... You can either tap your legs, tap a table, clap your hands. I use my legs because it was easier to do the 1 2 3, because you can swap between. Whereas if you're clapping, you've got to obviously move very quickly, but it's entirely up to you. Let's have a little go at playing in time with the music. Dun, dun, dun. Try on your own. And you can hear that that pattern is there all the way through that section. That ostinato pattern doesn't disappear. It stays there all the time, all the way through. And actually into the next section, that rhythmic pattern continues. Okay. There are a few other bits and pieces that I can tell you about the piece. So it sort of captures that idea of chaos, of battle as it builds. So if you listen to the whole track, you can hear it building and building and building and building. These driving rhythms, these clashing harmonies, that pounding percussion gets even more. I mean, they've got gongs later on that are added to the music. There's quite a lot going on. You've got bass drums, you've got side drums. There's a real sense of urgency and aggression in there. So it's that idea of it all sort of building, and there's a coda at the end as well. And at the coda at the end, you've got these sort of stabbing chords that are going on, where everybody comes together and it's dum, da da dum. It's really dramatic. I honestly listen to the whole piece. Well worth it. You won't regret it. It's a fantastic piece of music. Really, really amazing. Okay. So we talked about the Roman god. We've talked about the music, which is just awesome. What we haven't talked about is actually Mars, the planet itself. I mean, let's be honest, that's what's the influence of all of this. So let's just have a little think about Mars, the planet, and see how much I'm telling you that you already knew, because I bet you probably know quite a lot about Mars, the planet already. Now, obviously these videos are being recorded and will be up for a long time, but just to sort of, I mean, it was sort of like help to date stamp this. There is an amazing thing happening in our skies at the moment. And on Friday, all 7 planets will be aligned and you will be able to see them in the night sky. And you probably won't be able to see all 7 with the naked eye, but at least 4 of them. And if you've got strong binoculars or a lens that you can look at the night sky, you should be able to see all 7 planets in a line. And it's going to be the last time that this happens for about 15 years. So the next time it'll happen will be 2040. So have a look at that night sky. Some of them are already aligned, so you'll be able to see planets aligned already. But the 7th one, Friday night, is supposed to be the best for viewing it. Okay, which will be the 28th of February. Okie dokie. So let's talk about Mars. Mars is the 4th planet from the sun. So first piece in the suite, but the 4th planet from the sun. And it does have seasons, just like Earth does, but the seasons are quite different in that they're quite uneven. So whereas we sort of think of a season as being 3 months long and we have our, they're sort of split up quite evenly, it doesn't happen like that on Mars. So one season could be really long and then another season can be very, very short. And obviously, depending on whether you're in the north or the south, depends on which season you're in, because winter and summer will be opposites, etc. It has polar ice caps. It has extinct volcanoes. It has canyons. It has weather, all things that we associate with Earth, but Mars has as well. And it's one of the most explored bodies in the solar system. It's the only planet that has had rovers sent to it. And there was a rover that was sent quite a long time ago that is still sending messages and information back from the planet's surface. I think I'm right in saying that very recently it's broken one of its wheels. They're a little bit worried. It's got 6 wheels and one of them's broken. So we don't know whether it's going to be able to keep moving, but it is sending information back, which is amazing. NASA missions, there's lots of evidence come back from Mars that it was wetter and warmer than it is now, and it got a thicker atmosphere than it has now, but that was all like billions and billions of years ago. Now, as we know, Mars was named after the Roman god of war, and it's because of its reddish colour. It's reminiscent of blood, and so that's why they named it Mars. But the Egyptians, and I hope I get my pronunciation right here, the Egyptians actually called it Herdesha. There we go, Herdesha, which means the red one. And it's often referred to, we do it ourselves, as the red planet. The red colour is due to iron minerals rusting in the Martian soil, and that's sort of why it's got that sort of rusty redness. It's about half the size of the Earth, and it takes 13 minutes for sunlight to travel from the sun to Mars, the planet. Now, Martian days are called sols or solar days, and they last for about 24.6 hours, which is very similar to an Earth day in that respect. But a year on Mars is 669.6 solar days, or would be the equivalent of 687 Earth days. So their years are considerably longer than ours. Mars has the largest volcano in the solar system. It's called Olympus Mons, and it's 3 times taller than Mount Everest. And Mars also appears to have had a very watery past. There is water on Mars even today, but the atmosphere is so thin that the water can't exist on the surface for very long. And so water ice is just under the surface in the polar regions. of the planet, and there is at some times of the year, in some seasons, salty water that flows down some of the hillsides and crater walls as well. The atmosphere is thin, and that means that it doesn't offer much protection from impact from things like meteorites or asteroids or comets. They can penetrate the atmosphere and hit the planet because the atmosphere is so thin. Now the temperature is very different to ours. The temperature can be as high as 20, 24, 25 degrees Celsius, and can go as low as minus 153. Just take that in. Minus 153. That is so cold. Heat from the sun sort of easily escapes because of the thin atmosphere. And if you stood on Mars's equator, your feet, at sort of like 12 noon, your feet would be about 24 degrees Celsius and your head would be at 0. Yeah, it's very, I mean, my mind was completely blown when I was reading all of this. This is all from NASA. So we know that it's good. We know that it's good information. There's lots of information about Mars on the NASA website, and it's well worth having a look and looking at the pictures as well of Mars. There's a fantastic thing that you can spin the planet and have a look at the whole planet, not just one sort of 2D picture, but spin the planet round and have a good look at it. And it's got photographs from the rover missions and things like that as well, to give you a real insight and an idea of what the planet is like. So it's definitely worth having a look at, because I've only touched the surface of facts. There's so much more that I could tell you, but I'd need an hour. So we're not going to go there. But there is so much information out there. It's fascinating. It's worth having a little look. So how has Mars inspired people? Mars has inspired a lot of people. Now, the first thing you can see there is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Now, this is a book, a novel that was written between 1895 and 1897. It's one of the earliest stories about a war between humans and beings from another planet, and that's quite significant. The story involves an invasion by Martians, so people from Mars. The book has never been out of print. It has been in continuous print since the day it was published. And there's been films made based on it. There's been radio dramas, there's music, there's TV series. There's all sorts of things have been inspired by this book. And this book was inspired by Mars, the planet. There was actually a radio play that was broadcast in 1938 that was broadcast in America. It actually caused some people to panic because it was done like a news broadcast and they didn't realize it was fiction. And so you can imagine they would got really anxious. Now, the novel has also inspired scientists, and this is really important because he's a very important man, Robert H. Goddard. Now, he went on to develop the liquid-fueled rocket and multi-stage rocket, and it's due to his working with other scientists that enabled the Apollo 11 mission to go and land on the moon. So this novel and the planet inspiring Robert H. Goddard is very significant because he went out and did something so inspired. We had the Apollo 11 mission to the moon. So the story, let's just have a little think about the story of The War of the Worlds. It's about aliens on Mars plotting an invasion of Earth. They consumed all of their own natural resources and they're having to find somewhere else to go. So they've got their eye on Earth and they come down in an object that looks like they think it's a meteor that's landed in Surrey, and it's not actually. It's a cylinder containing Martians, and the invasion basically begins. And you've got these three-legged Martian fighting machines. You can see a picture of one there. Like tripods, and they're destroying everything in their path. And the Martians are sort of, they want to destroy all the humans and take over the planet themselves. And they've got this red weed, this prickly vegetation that is spreading out everywhere. And that's as much as I'm going to tell you, because I would like you to go and read the book. And it would be really bad of me to tell you what happens next. So it's a really fascinating story, and it's influenced music too. There is a composer called Jeff Wayne who has written an amazing album of music that is inspired by the story, and it's being performed everywhere. I mean, he's out on tour again with it this year, I believe. There's also an immersive experience in London that uses virtual reality, holograms, and live theatre with the music by Jeff Wayne, that tells the story of War of the Worlds. So, who knew that Mars, this red planet, would inspire so much? Okay, music not just by Holst, but music by Jeff Wayne, based on this book by H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells influenced by the planet. It so much inspiration from a little planet. We have got to the end of our lesson today, but here's some suggestions for things that you can do. And if you've got the worksheet, actually, these ideas are listed on the worksheet for you to have a go at. So you could have a go at designing and drawing your own Martian. That would be amazing. And if you've got some, once you've created them, if you wanted to sort of send them to Theatre of Music so that we can have a look at those creations, that would be amazing to see your designs. We could perhaps find a way of putting some of them up somewhere so that people could see just how creative you could be. Obviously, we'd only put names and things if that was okay. Otherwise, we would just put your pictures up and you'd be able to see them. Be amazing. You could write a short science fiction story about Mars. Be inspired like H.G. Wells. You could create a poster about Mars, the planet, putting lots of facts about the planet itself. I've only given you a few. Go on that NASA website, find out some more information. Learn how to play the opening melodic idea of Mars, the bringer of war, in time with the music. Now you can see that there aren't many notes. It's got 3 notes in it. G, D, C sharp. That's it. G, D, C sharp. It's the timing on that makes it difficult, because you're counting in 5 and you have to make sure that you count it really carefully. But if you had a go at playing along with the music, then you'd probably find it that little bit easier. So we've reached the end of our lesson with Mars. I hope to see you next week for the next lesson on our planets, when we'll be looking at the second planet in the suite. I wonder if, rather than me tell you, I wonder if you can guess what this second planet will be. It's not in the order from the sun. Otherwise, you'll have to wait till next week. I will see you then. Enjoy listening to Mars, Bringer of War, and I hope that you do have a go at some of those other activities, because I think certainly writing the story, the poster about Mars, go on that NASA website, listen to that music being played by an orchestra. It is phenomenal. Bye for now.